Welcome back to the podcast where we ask the question, what makes you happy? Our guest today is going to help you understand the internal battle going on within you and teach you how to navigate it. They're Bethany Inez from Byron Bay, Australia. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me on the show.
Exciting to have another Australian here to talk about the things that make them happy. So Bethany, would you share with us today what does make you happy?
Absolutely. So what makes me most happy in life, first of all, life in general makes me happy, but my connection to spirit is the biggest thing with that. And I feel like in my connection to spirit, that creates a foundation over all of my life where happiness is then possible, right? Like being connected to that source of energy outside of me is also being connected to the part of my soul internally as well. And so in that connection, in that alignment, it just creates happiness everywhere. Every part where I show up is in so much peace and alignment that it's just a joy living from that space. And so for me, the second thing that makes me most happy is teaching other people how to live the same way, to actually be able to work on the two parts within themselves and really tame the ego so that they can connect to their true self and they can live in the same state of happiness and peace. Absolutely lights me up.
When did you realize that lit you up?
I think when I started my career as a hairdresser for 20 years, and I think I didn't really care about the hair. I just cared about the conversation with people. And when I could actually support people into breaking out of the fear-based mentality and coming into, that power that is within them and seeing that shift, or them recognizing and landing at their authentic self, that for me was the best part. And so, it was this simple merging from there of going, oh my gosh, this is my favorite thing. I'm going to merge into life coaching where I get to do this all day, every day.
I guess I can kind of relate to you just find that drive, having those conversations and empowering and lifting people up in all facets of their life, not just cutting their hair. So yeah, that's an amazing, and it's so organic how it just comes about. Talk to me about your advice for our listeners. So the question we ask is, what makes you happy? And that's a very challenging question to it's confronting, because you're like, whoa, I've never really thought about the things that really make me happy to an extent or depth. What would you say to our listeners when asking themselves that question and trying to figure out that inner battle going on?
What I'm coming from is like, to create happiness ongoing is to be at peace with ourselves and to be in connection with our most authentic self. And then when we've done that, wherever we show up, we are at peace and able to be at the full spectrum of being happy. And so to do that, I really explained that there's two different parts to us. And I refer to it as being our ego or our true self. And our ego is our fear-based, like lack mentality. And our true self is our limitless, powerful love energy, ability to know that we are the creators of our life and being able to create anything that we want. And so when I teach someone to actually navigate those two pieces by listening to the ways that they sound and feel, like your ego, it actually feels like force and tension in your body, whereas your true self comes through as patience and peace and has can still be firm, but it's got a softness to it that feels inviting to be a part of. And so when someone can understand those two different parts and recognize, hey, this is actually just my ego talking to me right now, which means it's fear and lack and limitation. And I actually don't need to listen to that one. They can shut that one off and then come back into connection with their true self. And our true self is always going to guide us into our most powerful state. It's going to take you into your purpose for being here. It's going to take you into experiences that are going to bring you joy in life. And while it's quieter in the beginning, we can train ourselves to actually listen more to that so that we have a more abundant, carefree, powerful life because of how we're being guided.
Through a little bit of study and research, I've sort of come across a inner dialogue that I like to have with myself. I start to talk to myself about things that give me anxiety, and I may be super stressed. I'm like, okay, well, why am I super stressed right now? Okay, I acknowledge that. It's okay. I understand where that comes from. And I have this conversation in my own head and I start to rationalize my thoughts. And I do sometimes use phrases. I'm like, well, how is this thinking potentially serving me? Is this fear-based? Is this logic-based? Where does that come from? So that's kind of where I was sort of heading for. But so that's something I like to ask myself is this coming from a state of fear right now?
Something that I do with people is, because the ego is in the mind, we actually think it's us. Like we actually think that that ongoing chatter is our own voice instead of understanding that we are the observer of that chatter. And so a tactic that I do give people is to actually name their ego. You can just refer to it as being the ego, or some people give it a name like a Nancy or something, and it's the person at school that used to drive them crazy. And so what we can do with that is we disassociate from that voice as being us. We can disconnect that connection. And then from that connection, we can come back to being the observer. We can go like, okay, wow, that's Nancy going, sorry for any Nancy's listening right now. I'm sure you're lovely, but like that's just Nancy going off. And I get to choose whether I listen to her rather than having it as being us and then not being able to see beyond that.
Bethany, this has been a super fantastic conversation to talk about all things that make you happy and the beautiful insights that you've provided with us today. Thank you very much for sharing everything.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. We hope it gives you something to think about on your quest to discover what makes you happy. Make sure to check out whatmakesyouhappypodcast.com to connect with today's guest and follow us on all our social media platforms and to stay up to date at what's happening next at What Makes You Happy. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend, and we'll see you next time.